I'm Dr. Josh Matthews, and in this video today, we're going to talk about one of the greatest directors ever, certainly one of the greatest American film directors. It's Orson Welles, and I'm going to give you his top 7 movie list coming up next. Alright, so the subject of movie making or video creation is everywhere these days. On YouTube, there's tons of videos on how to make videos. And of course, a lot of people want to learn cinematography and editing because they're doing what I'm doing, which is making a YouTube video. To me, you need to study some of the masters of film in order to understand how to even make any kind of video. Just like reading great literature helps you become a better writer and thinker, watching movies makes you become a better video maker, a better editor, a better cinematographer. There's probably nobody better to start with or to deal with than Orson Welles. Welles was a master of photography, of cinematography, of lighting, of shadows, and of making the story come alive through visual elements and sound elements. He was also a fantastic editor. And so I think even if you hate his stories, you hate his acting, you don't like black and white movies, you just watch his movies shot for shot, and you will absorb some great techniques. But I also think he's a master filmmaker who really deserves scrutiny and analysis. And I think a lot of you who really like movies will like Welles a lot. So here's the top 7 list. Number 7 on my list is a confusing movie because it's got 2 titles and there are 9 different versions of this thing. It's the movie Mr. Arkadin, also known as Confidential Report. And Mr. Arkadin is a good example of one of the major problems in Welles's career. When Welles made his first movie, Citizen Kane, he had the ability to do whatever he wanted to. RKO Studios gave him carte blanche to make whatever movie he wanted. And so he did. But every movie thereafter that he made within the Hollywood studios was messed with by studio executives, revamped, redone, and actually made probably a lot worse. Welles was endlessly frustrated by this, and that's why later in his life, in fact, in the late 1940s, 1950s, he goes to Europe and becomes basically one of the first indie filmmakers ever. He scrounged together funds and tried to make movies, and it took him many years to make several of these movies, and Mr. Arkadin is one of them. Anyway, this is a great noir movie where Welles plays a tycoon. It's got espionage, it's got spying, and actually I don't want to give much away. I just say go watch this movie because you'll see Welles in action with the lighting and the shadows and the noir imagery, which he does so well in so many of his movies. I gotta tell you how to watch it. You need to get the Criterion Collection edition of this movie, and then watch what's called the Criterion Edit. This is one of the 9 versions, and it's probably the most accurate to Welles's own vision. If you watch any other version, including the free ones online that are out of copyright, they are not that great.
Not everybody can say they had a private audience with a great Arkadin. I mean alone, like this.
I'm not the only one who knows about Bracco. He's dead, but he told us something about you. Something you'd like kept quiet. He was knifed. Yeah, and then there's Sophie.
Knifed? Knifed by you?
Do I look like a killer?
No, you're simply a fool. I will not ask you your price because you have nothing to sell. But still, I'll make you an offer. I'm going to give you something to sell, and then I will pay you for it. Come on.
Number 6 is a documentary, and it's one of the freshest documentaries I've ever seen. In fact, it's from the early 1970s, and it's called F for Fake. And you watch it today, and though some of the costumes are dated, it feels as alive and fresh as ever. In fact, in this era of fake news and nobody knowing who's true or false in the media, F for Fake is a perfect movie to watch because it's about how videos create illusions, in fact, are magic tricks. It's to show you how video makers don't create truthful images, they actually create lies or illusions with videos. Apparently in the 1970s, people didn't know that as well as today, but even still today, people believe what they see on camera. They think the camera doesn't lie, but Welles, throughout his entire career, including in Citizen Kane itself, his first movie, wanted to show that movies and all video are illusions. And so F for Fake as a documentary is a great documentary about forgery, illusions, and deceptions. I did find the movie confusing on first viewing. I had to watch it a second time in order to really understand understand it. I think this documentary from the early 1970s destroys the lie that Welles became just a fat old man who didn't realize his potential in his career. I mean, Welles was a great movie maker and arguably made, I think, his best movies in his late 40s, in his 50s, basically in the decade of the 1960s and 70s. And so F for Fake is a good example of that. Go watch it if you want to see a film from later in Welles' career.
Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction, this is a film about trickery and fraud, about lies. Tell it by the fireside or in a marketplace or in a movie. Almost any story is almost certainly some kind of lie. But not this time. No, this is a promise. During the next hour, everything you'll hear from us is really true and based on solid facts.
My number 5 on this list is a fabulous film noir. It's The Lady from Shanghai. This is an example of Welles directing himself as a lead actor. And I love Welles as an actor. I think he's got a great voice, as everybody else does too. I think he's charming and captivating and charismatic and also terrifying on film at times. But this movie is famous for a lot of things, including, for example, the ending wonderful Hall of Mirrors sequence that's been endlessly copied. In fact, when I watched John Wick 2 a couple of years ago and saw at the end of that movie a Hall of Mirrors sequence, I thought, oh, they're quoting The Lady from Shanghai. If you know anything about film noir, if you enjoy noir at all, you'll want to watch this movie.
In here, we're less likely to be heard.
Coming in at number 4 is probably the greatest noir ever, one of the top 5. It's Touch of Evil. Touch of Evil is so famous for its opening shot, a very long take where the camera goes above a street. The suspense is held as you see explosives put in a car. The car crosses a border and drives for a while down a street, and you're wondering, when the heck are these explosives going to blow up? It's a bomb with a timer, after all. And it's a shot quoted endlessly. In fact, so many of the directors today using long takes or movies that look like they're one take, such as 1917 or Gravity or The Revenant, owe a great debt to the vision that Welles showcased in Touch of Evil. Now, this movie is also about U.S.-Mexico relations and crossing borders. All the border crossing imagery and content in this movie is fabulous and timely for the present day. In fact, that's another underrated thing about Welles. He's a prophet in a lot of ways. His movies are fresh and alive because the topics that we deal with today, at least in the United States, are in his movies from 40, 50, 60 years ago. In Touch of Evil, Charlton Heston plays a Mexican official who's investigating a crime, and he's got to cross a border repeatedly. He faces off against the Orson Welles character, who is a big bad sheriff. There's a lot of stuff in this movie about legal jurisdictions, U.S. and Mexico, and the difference between cultures, and yet a border where they cross endlessly. So go watch Touch of Evil. I think you'll like it.
I merely asked him if I could use the telephone.
El teléfono está en la recámara.
Now, number 3 on my list is tough to watch. I dare say that most people I know, maybe most of you, actually won't like this movie. But I love it. I think this is a wonderful movie. I'm sort of hypnotized by this movie. It's The Trial. This is a late 60s movie from Orson Welles. All of the prints of this movie so far are pretty bad. You'll find a DVD copy of this movie or free online on the internet. It's not going to look that good. I'm waiting for somebody to clean this movie up and release a restored version. But the version you'll see is still amazing. And I think one of Welles' flaws, he wasn't so good with stories. Intense, complex stories that captivate me. He's better at cinematography, editing, sound, and all the technical stuff that's in a movie. Here in The Trial, he takes the Franz Kafka story, or the novel, The Trial, which is unfinished by Kafka, and he's able to just not even tell a story. Because The Trial is not really a story, it's just a premise. Joseph K. is arrested, doesn't know what he's guilty of, and awaits a trial that happens later in the story. But most of the trial is wandering around, talking to people, seeing things. And that's what Welles does so well, is cut from scene to scene, shot to shot, and the trial allows him the freedom to do so and be very imaginative with his shot making. Anthony Perkins stars in this. It's a wonderful adaptation of Franz Kafka. Only thing I don't like about this movie is the last 30 seconds. I disagree with the choice of the ending, but nevertheless, I could watch this once a year and be pretty happy with it.
Get her out of here.
But she says that it's urgent.
I don't care what she says. Just get her out of here.
Now, number 2, before I get there, I want to mention a movie I'm not putting in this list. A lot of critics would disagree with me, but I feel like this movie doesn't deserve to be in a top 10 or top 7 list of Welles. It's his second movie ever made, The Magnificent Ambersons. I mention this movie because it's probably the greatest lost movie in the history of cinema so far. Welles made this movie, had a 2.5-hour, 3-hour cut of it, but then went down to South America to make some pro-America documentaries because this was World War II, and he was trying to help out with the war effort. He took his final cut of The Magnificent Ambersons with him. Meanwhile, while he's gone, the American studio took his movie, cut it up, reshot the ending, and made a 2-hour version that is, frankly, to me, very flawed. Welles's final cut was lost. It may still be sitting in a vault in South America, and I hope one of you go look for it and find it, because it would be the greatest find in the history of cinema. And I have no doubt that his final cut of Magnificent Ambersons is almost as good, if not as good, as Citizen Kane. The source material for this novel is Booth Tarkington's early 1900s novel, which is a great novel. You should read it. And Welles was a wonderful adapter of plays and novels, as this video is shown. And that's where I want to get to my number 2, Welles's Chimes at Midnight. Chimes at Midnight is an adaptation of Shakespeare. It's Henry IV parts 1 and 2 combined, with I think a tiny little bit of Henry V. Welles gets to play the character he was born to play, John Falstaff. Obviously a famous character from Shakespeare, one of the most famous, a huge wit, literally and metaphorically. And it might be one of the best film adaptations of Shakespeare, if not one of the top 2 or 3 ever. The war footage in this movie is great. Mel Gibson recognized that and took that as inspiration for his movie Braveheart, which then has inspired pretty much every war movie since the early 1990s. In fact, that's a strong argument for Welles as one of the greatest movie makers ever. The number of movie makers he's influenced around the world is enormous. He's basically the granddaddy or great-granddaddy of every modern movie made. The trajectory goes from Orson Welles to the French New Wave to American Hollywood cinema of the 1970s to movie makers of today. Welles is a cornerstone of cinema, therefore.
There's your Percy. If your father will do me any honor, so if not, let him kill the next Percy himself.
Why, Percy I killed,
Yes, sir.
and saw thee dead.
Lord, how this world is given to lying.
Let me mention 2 more movies, Macbeth and Othello by Welles. I really like his version of Othello. It's pretty weird. The dubbing is terrible. His Macbeth version, I think, was ruined by the studio. But both of them are Shakespeare adaptations as well. And if you like Shakespeare, go watch them. My number 1 on this list is Citizen Kane. I've been trying to avoid that for years. I've tried to talk myself out of loving Citizen Kane. I've tried to say, you know what, this isn't that great of a movie. It's moralistic. The story is too simple. I try to come up with all kinds of reasons to not like this movie. And then I rewatch it every once in a while and I go, yep, this is totally relevant. It's great. I can't say anything bad about this movie except for maybe it is just too moralistic about money. So here we sit in February 2020, and in the United States, we have a person running for president who is a media mogul. He's trying to buy his way to power. He's trying to use money to influence people. I'm talking about Mike Bloomberg, and he may be forgotten in a couple of years. But Welles's idea in this movie, and to take William Randolph Hearst's life and run with it and create this character of Charles Foster Kane, who's made of money, tries to influence people through the newspaper business, throws his money around to become an influencer and gain power. Welles really hit one of the main arteries of American culture. I mean, he's got his finger on it, and he's taken its pulse. Ever since 1941, when this movie was released, American culture has been increasingly going towards the wealthy and the powerful having great political influence, if it already wasn't in 1941. This movie is also about the perspectivism rampant in our world today. The movie seems to give you a straightforward biography of the Charles Foster Kane character. You hear eyewitness testimony, one after the other, tell you parts of his life, and then the whole movie is sort of a jigsaw puzzle, assembling the pieces for you so you can see his life as a whole. But in truth, you watch this movie and you see that every single eyewitness is seriously biased, and they're telling their version of the Charles Foster Kane story that they want to tell. Are any of these people trustworthy in this movie who are talking about Kane? The more I watch this movie, the more I say no. And of course, the opening newsreel of this movie is untrustworthy as well. Wells shows you that when the movie reel is over, and then the journalists are in this smoky, dark, dank room. It's as if the truth, although it's projected onto a screen, it looks real in video, is all constructed by backroom journalists hunting for an angle so they can drum up business, which is exactly what Charles Foster Kane as a newspaperman does. I think this movie is about fake news journalism, yellow journalism, problems with people being influenced by the media influencers trying to drum up business, trying to gain power, trying to get their agenda across. Citizen Kane is as relevant today as it was in 1941. It is legitimately a great, great movie. Thanks for watching. Please comment on this video if you have any questions about Welles or any comments about Welles in this, what I said about Welles in this video. Please leave it. Thanks for subscribing. Have a great, great day.